students, it's Emily Pohl. Let's talk about the continuation of the Protestant Reformation. So in my last video, I left us on a cliffhanger and I said, students, I wonder if this new Christian denomination is going to lead to any conflict in Europe. And y'all, yes, of course it does. Martin Luther published his 95 Theses and then was brought before Pope Leo X at the Diet of Worms. Or the Diet of Worms, if you want to be specific about it. Pope Leo X is like, Martin Luther, what you're saying is terrible. You must recant of all of it. And then we can go back to being a normal, religiously unified Europe. Martin Luther said, I will not recant, here I stand. And then Pope Leo X was like, great, you're excommunicated. Excommunicated in the Catholic Church means that you are no longer allowed to participate in any church sacrament at all. But that didn't matter to Martin Luther because he did not recognize the authority of the Catholic Church over any of those sacraments. After this, Martin Luther is secluded away into a castle in Germany where he then translates the entire New Testament into German. And the German Peasants War breaks out. Peasants were tired of being oppressed by the wealthy nobility in Germany and also by the clergy, who they started to view as corrupt. The peasants, as a result, started to fight against the clergy and the nobility, and they thought that they had Martin Luther's support, but Luther was like, no, at the end of the day, Christians should still submit to the rulers, even if the rulers are corrupt. And in a very interesting turn of events, Martin Luther then actually encouraged the nobility to crush this German peasant revolution. Which means the major effect of the German Peasants' War is that the nobility gained a lot of power and influence in Germany, and Germany then became solidified as a Lutheran Protestant land. About 100,000 peasants died in the German Peasant War, and after it ends, Martin Luther then goes back to his work of translating the Bible from Latin into the German vernacular, which he finishes the Old Testament in 1534. Y'all, it is because of the printing press that the Protestant Reformation was as successful as it was. And since the Renaissance, the European populace was already more literate. The printing presses popped up everywhere in Europe, and people were pretty eager to read the Bible on their own, especially if it meant maybe weakening the power of the Catholic Church. But let's continue this conflict in Germany in the middle of the 1500s. These German princes that had been mobilized after their win of the German Peasants' War got into conflict with Charles V, the Habsburg leader, who was very staunchly Catholic. A religious civil war breaks out in Germany between the Protestants and the Catholics. And what you need to know about this, students, is that it ends in 1555 with Charles V signing the Peace of Augsburg. The Peace of Augsburg was the first example in Western Europe of establishing religious pluralism, which means that two religions can coexist at the same time, and it is up to the leader of that specific area to determine if he wants his people to be Lutheran or Roman Catholic, because everyone disagreed with Calvin at this point. Don't forget about those Anabaptists. What radicals. Hey, speaking of Calvin, here's where some political differences emerge between Luther and Calvin. Luther believed that the church should be subordinate to the state, which means that Luther said, hey, we still need to recognize the political authority that people have over the church. The government should still exist and should be separate. Calvin, on the other hand, said that the government should just be the church and they should be one and the same. And actually, the best form of government is a theocracy. It is the duty of the Calvinists to Christianize the state through laws. Not even half a century after the Protestant Reformation began with Martin Luther in 1517, religious wars and conflicts are breaking out across Europe. If we think back to what I told you my overarching thesis was for this entire time period, that early modern Europeans are challenging traditionally held sources of power in a bunch of different ways. If we're looking at the Protestant Reformation, these new Protestants are, yes, challenging the religious power of the Catholic Church, but they are also challenging monarchical power and the power of any kind of authority. And we see this with Puritans in England and Huguenots, aka French Calvinists, in France. Y'all, it is about to get bloody in this class. But to end on somewhat of a positive note, I gotta talk about the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth because that is weirdly a thing I think about too much, and I think it stands as a good testament to what's happening in Eastern Europe while religious wars are plaguing Western Europe. In 1573, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth passes the Act of the Warsaw Confederation, which establishes the freedom of religion for anyone within their lands. And I mean anyone. I'm not only talking about Catholics and Lutherans and Calvinists and Anabaptists, I'm also talking about Jews and Muslims. Now you might be thinking, yeah, Emily, that makes sense. Of course people should be able to practice whatever faith they want to. Y'all, not in the 1500s across the world. So shout out to this often neglected empire that I actually don't think is brought up at all in your AP Euro curriculum, but you're welcome for now knowing about it. Next time we're going to talk a ton about religious wars, and as always, students, you can do it. I believe in you.